Well, hopefully it'll go as planned. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar so that we can get some folks in. And we've got some folks already joining us. I knew that you were going to be a popular one today, Dr. Stevens. Everybody's making sure to get in here early.
So does my face show up during this entire thing or no?
Yes,
Okay.
your face will show up, so everyone will get to see how charismatic you are when you are presenting.
Well, I don't know about that, but I talk with my hands a lot, so that's good.
I think I would be completely muted if I didn't have my hands to speak. We'll give folks a couple more minutes to start joining us or to continue joining us, and then we will move forward. I see some familiar names on our participant list today. Welcome, everybody. Okay, well, I know, Dr. Stevens, I know we've got a lot of ground to cover, so if it's all right with you, I'll go ahead and get started on my end. So on behalf of the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina and the Southeastern School Behavioral Health Community, I would like to welcome everyone to this month's national webinar. We are incredibly honored to have with us Dr. Robert Stevens. He is sharing with us today his expertise and incredible wealth of experience. To that end, Dr. Stevens has 40 years of experience in education as a teacher, coach, principal, as well as, let's see here, what else we have? A consultant for the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina, as well as the Southeastern School Behavioral Health Community, and a number of other initiatives that are occurring throughout South Carolina, as well as nationally. He also has been a college administrator and professor, and we're very grateful to have Dr. Stevens here today. And before we get started and turn it over to Dr. Stevens, a couple of housekeeping items. Please type your questions and responses for Dr. Stevens in the chat box as they arise. If you would prefer anonymity, you can always use the Q&A feature as well. I'll be happy to field all of your input to Dr. Stevens throughout our presentation. Furthermore, he has graciously shared with us some fantastic resources, and we will make sure to make those available to all of you on our website at www.schoolbehavioralhealth.org/BASK. And last big ticket item here, we do have a pre and post survey for our presentation today. So I'm going to go ahead and post that for you all to populate your information in there. It's just 3 simple questions. And Dr. Stevens, while I'm doing that, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. And I'll give everybody that is with us currently an opportunity to complete this poll. All right, so our poll has been launched. And I will make sure to add any resources as well as the website link into our chat box momentarily, as well as throughout our presentation today. All right, thank you all so much. I see everybody's starting to put their poll answers in. All right, about halfway there. For those of you that are just now joining us, we have our pre-survey up and running. Please orient yourself to that and fill out just 3 simple questions. Okay. And Dr. Stevens, if you'd like to go ahead and create your, make your screen full screen, that would be appropriate. Okay. And I'm going to be closing the survey in a little under a minute here. Again, thank you all so much for your contribution. It's very helpful to us to know who we have the privilege of learning alongside today. All right, so without further ado, thank you so very much to Dr. Stevens, who is a dear friend of Basque and the Southeastern School Behavioral Health community, and just an incredible human across the board. I know we have a lot of ground to cover, so Dr. Stevens, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up there, Taylor. Okay, very good. Boy, this is difficult, as you know. Can't see everybody, and I am one of those presenters that really likes to read my audience. So these times are tough. Hello, and my name is Bob Stevens. I've been working in South Carolina in behavioral health as well as other areas, as Taylor mentioned, for a long time, working with several really interesting initiatives right now. The Basque Initiative that Taylor is that is sponsoring this presentation, but also the State Department of Education's AWARE initiatives. There's another initiative for quality improvement in the same area called COIN. Several of our districts are involved in that. There's a very large research project around this work in Greenville County called PCORI. And then the University of South Carolina has another project called All for South Carolina that is working with a couple of districts on whole child education. So there's a lot of things going on in South Carolina right now. And one of the things that always comes up and has been coming up for a number of years is the issue of bullying. So we're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to try to move through some initial bullying, some what I think is some critical information, and really get into the tier 2 area of bullying and the kinds of things we need to do. So we're going to have about 45 minutes now, and we are looking forward to it. Taylor is going to read the any things that come up, and she will break in if there's some any comment to be made based on what you type into the chat box. We have so many people will not be sharing the microphone today, so thank you so much, though. All right. First thing I'd like to say is there's a number of bullying prevention efforts from Basque this year. They're doing things all month. This meeting, this presentation is part of that, but you can see other ones that are going on. We have some good presentations on Alveus, which I will be mentioning as part of mine presentation today, although today I'm not specifically recommending any bullying prevention, but it's more how to make the bullying prevention work in concert with your school character ed, as well as your expectations, school-wide expectations, and then how we can take that and work at tier 2 level to prevent bullying in our schools and address it. The other thing I'd like to say is I co-chair the Southeastern School Behavioral Health Conference, which is coming up in April this year. Last year we had to cancel, unfortunately. This year it'll be a hybrid. It's one of the premier behavioral health conferences in the Southeast. It's in Myrtle Beach in April, and you can go to the Basque page to find out more about that. I encourage you to attend either virtually able to in person. So just a little bit of a commercial there for that. Okay, outcomes for today. What are we going to try to accomplish? We are going to, first of all, I'm going to reacquaint everyone with facts and why we need to address bullying. We're going to talk about what some of the evidence-based and specifically one inexpensive bullying curriculum we might use, and understand how we can use tier 2 interventions to address bullying, specifically with bullies and victims. So we're going to cover a lot of territory. We're going to be spending some time talking about tier 2 interventions, which in South Carolina is an area that we need to do a lot more work on. So hopefully it'll be useful not only for bullying, but for some of your school behavioral health initiatives. And I'm going to go quickly. I know I'm talking quickly, and I apologize for that, but we've got a lot of material to cover. There are a number of handouts that will be available to you off the BAS page as well. So I know we're getting some Q&As there. And Taylor, if something comes up we need to mention, please break right in. Okay, before we start, what is bullying? What is bullying? And I am going to take a quick quiz here. I'm going to break off on this, and this is one of the items that we have available. It's one page. It's a Word document. It's information I've collected from a variety of sources, and I'm not going to read each one of these, but I'm going to let you go down them. And again, this is available. Most bullying takes place on school grounds during school hours, and that is absolutely true. And boys tend to bully with physical behaviors while girls bully with words. That's true, but that is changing, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go on to some things. You can see some of the classic sort of true false thoughts here, and I just this is a great place to start out as we're thinking about bullying. Bullying is greatest in the elementary school. That's not correct. It's actually greatest in middle school. Peaks between grades 4 and 7, very end of elementary and middle. Okay. And again, obviously most bullying occurs when it's away from adults. So you can see some of the kinds of things on a bullying quiz. Again, I'm not going to read through all this, but you're welcome to look through it at your leisure. Number 11 is a particularly interesting one. Everybody thinks that children who bully are typically not well developed socially in the school, and quite often they are very. They can often be the school leaders will be bullies, and that's a interesting characteristic people don't realize sometimes. Okay, so here we see this wonderful quiz that you're welcome to use, and I just wanted to show it to you, so I'm going to jump back and continue our slideshow from the current slide. And I want to ask everyone a question, and I want you to put it in because we're going to do a count. We know how many people are here. If you are willing to, I always ask this when I do a bullying presentation. How many people here, and you can just say yes or I, or just type in an I in the chat box. How many of you were bullied when you were in school? How many folks were bullied when you were in school? And I'm going to wait for a minute, and I'm going to ask Taylor to kind of just give me a sense of whether we're getting a lot of folks saying that they were bullied or not.
So it looks like we've got right now a good balance of yeses and nos.
Okay.
So we might need to increase some familiarity around the experience of bullying. And we say yes during middle school. We know middle school is a very difficult time. Thank you for sharing. So it looks like you've got a happy balance here of folks that have some experience, others that maybe not so much.
Okay, well, that's fairly typical. Usually when I do this, I get about a 50-50 split with the adults. And so it sounds like we're facing that. Later on, we'll do a little count and just see what it is. But thank you so much. The other bullets on here, I talk a little bit about work. We're in a very difficult time with COVID. And one of the things that the Behavioral Alliance has done, and many of us here talk about quite often, is taking care of ourselves. And I know situations where adults feel like they are bullied at work. And so we're not going to go into that now. I'm not going to ask you to say whether you're bullied at work or not, but it's a point that with all things we're doing right now, particularly around behavioral health, Self-care is one of the things that we always have to be. The BASC has a number of experts in self-care, and want more information or you feel like your school needs it, but we know that our teachers and ourselves can't do the best jobs with our kids if we're feeling a lot of anxiety or we're having the same health issues. And bullying is no different. Adults are sometimes bullied in their community, in their homes, and certainly at work. So I really want to make sure that if you feel that way, or you know folks that feel that way, that you get the self-care and the help that you need as adults, because you won't be able to do a good job with the kids. Okay, and one of the other things is difference now. I'm a pretty old guy, and when I was growing up, if you got bullied, mom and dad or the principal or the teacher said, well, just stick up for yourself. You got to deal with it. And expectations have changed, and so we have to think about that a little bit differently. As adults, we have to address some of these things now. We have to help address these things. That answer from when I was young is not the right answer. So we can't do that. Okay, what is bullying? Bullying is the repeated aggression, harassment, threats when one person has greater status or power than the other. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but it's critical that we understand it is repeated aggression. One of the issues, if any of you are school administrators or counselors, mom and dad come in because their child was in a fight and they say, my child was bullied. And we really have to understand what bullying is. It is a repeated event, it's repeated aggression, and the person has a greater status. How we address two kids who get in a fight, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, versus how we address a true bullying and victim situation is very different. And if we address bullies the same way we address two kids that were in a fight, we could do more damage than good. So we will talk about that. But we really need to come back to this bullying definition. I can't tell you how critical it is. It seems obvious. We all know what bullying is, but we really have to be able to have that conversation with the adults when they come into the building. Okay, I'm going to run through these very quickly. These are a lot of statistics over the next few screens that deal with why we should invest in bullying preventions and some of the issues that come from that. You're going to see a lot of different citations on here. This stuff's all available. The other thing that I would like to say, and I meant to say when I first started out, the bulk of my presentation comes from two very well-known professors, Dr. Rob Horner at the University of Oregon and Dr. Tim Lewis at University of Missouri. So all credit to everything on this screen goes to them. I've obviously done a little bit of editing to it for South Carolina in our context, but most of what we're talking today comes from Dr. Rob Horner, University of Oregon, Dr. Tim Lewis at University of Missouri, and they are both long-term, much longer than I have, folks who spent a lot of time dealing with bullying, but I want to shout out and give them the shout out they deserve. Here we see some things. Dropping out of school, suffer underachievement, all of these kinds of things we know. And again, I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to show them to you so you can take a look at them themselves. The LGBT bullying is kind of interesting. I just did a chapter in a book on LGBT bullying. One of the interesting things about that is it may not be the case in South Carolina, but the LGBT activists are so strident right now that this is one of the groups that we see the adults in their lives doing a much better job advocating for them. And nationally anyway, again, I don't know about South Carolina and other Southeast states, but nationally, what we found is that, man, the adults in the lives of LGBT youth or LGBT youth that live in LGBT families that might suffer bullying, those folks are not hesitant to come into the school and demand that we do something. So it's really interesting to see that's something unique about the LGBT community. Autism scale, obviously, intellectual disabilities, cross-cultural, all black, white, all cultures are involved with bullying. it is common across all socioeconomic statuses, as we mentioned. Okay, let's see what else we got on here. We got a number more here. Why should we address it? Agoraphobia, generalized anxiety, panic disorder, depression. Some very, very key things. This is an interesting point that I think another reason why we have to initiate this. In the last 15 years, in US states have passed 132 different state laws to address bullying in schools. South Carolina, it's been a number of years now, passed one of these laws. And essentially the South Carolina law says every school district in South Carolina must have an effective and comprehensive plan that requires schools to implement anti-bullying programs or initiatives. And we also having to collect data now in Power School on bullying. Doesn't say what you have to do. So you have great choice. Your MTSS program, we're going to be talking about that, has great flexibility in what they do, but you have to do something. You have to do something. That's the law in South Carolina. I've done a lot of grants in South Carolina with a number of different organizations, Safe Schools, MUSC, Department of Ed, I'm on some now. And so these are some stats that I developed based on research that I've done. This 83.9% of students see bullying in their school. That number varies widely. It usually goes from about 50% up to 83. Have you ever been bullied? The 40% around South Carolina and the Southeast has held for a number of years. We're now starting to see some numbers less than that as bullying prevention is more effective. It's down in the lower third. That 30 to 40% of students being bullied is pretty normal. And our poll at the beginning that we did reflected that. There is a difference between males and females, although that is changing. Traditionally, females were not as physical, and it was more isolation or exclusionary kind of bullying. We're seeing differences there. Girls are getting much more physical. I don't know, Title IX, maybe? No, I'm teasing. Yes, I see you on there. Taylor, do you have something to say?
Yeah, so one of our participants was commenting and curious about your response on the importance of self-care, especially for those individuals who maybe have experienced bullying. And they said as a district administrator, they have difficulty getting buy-in by the teachers for self-care help. They would love to hear insight on how to make it where they don't feel like we are giving them one or more things to view or feel like they have to participate in, even when we say it's to help them. The typical response these days are that they are complaining that we even mention it. Do you have any ideas, or is this something that we can maybe reflect on in latter slides?
Yeah, I'd like to say two things about that. Number one, I'm not an expert in self-care. However, one of the things that we're going to talk about, if we're trying to implement any new initiative in the school in these days, and I have a slide on this in a little bit, we cannot and we can't put another thing on the plates of our teachers without either removing something or what we put on fits well within something that we're already doing, so it doesn't create overburdensome. There's no question about that. Now, when it comes to self-care itself, I think that we need to present self-care in a way that our teachers and the adults in the building, not just the teachers, but our adults in the building, realize that this is time for them. So if we can make the case that is external to instructional time or filling out a report time or something else, this is their time. And in fact, this is time that will do them good, not time. That we're asking them to do something else for their students. It's time for them. And I think that's the way to tell it when it comes to self-care for the adults. For bullying in general, and again, we're going to talk about it, you can't initiate some new initiative in this day and age without looking at what you're doing, working smarter, taking something off the table, or combining what you want to do with something that's already going on so it's not burdensome. No question about that. That's a great question. Okay, why do you think kids are building? Again, these are some recent South Carolina things. I love the last one in there. They just asked for it, but anyway. But the first one's interesting too. I don't know why. I don't know why. There you see the kid that's picked on for being the smart kid in the class, or the teacher pet, or so forth. The biggest one, obviously, they are different and they act or weak. They are weaker or they are smaller. Where do you see it? Now, this is critical. We're going to talk about this again in a minute. And where do we see this? Stairwells, bathrooms, playgrounds, athletic fields, hall, classroom is at the bottom, but actually it occurs in the classroom as well. But we know that if you are going to address bullying, the simplest thing you can do, because we understand, is bullying takes place when there are not any adults present. So if you have a lot of bullying in your school, you got to look at how your adults in the building and where they are, and what's going on. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I came up with a data point, which I call the rusty folding chair on the playground data point. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Taylor really likes that one. Okay, so a few more facts here because we need to do these quickly. These are just some additional facts. We have a lot of them here. This one is scary, and this came out from both Alveus and the Committee for Children. And now this is serious bullying problems. So this is the very tip of the triangle, the most serious bullies, those that are really chronic bulliers. But we all have something like that. Scary. In recent years, we've talked a lot about adverse childhood experiences. So I wanted to include this after the initial curriculum was done, they did some follow-up research, and bullying can be considered an ACEs. And I just wanted to make sure that we understood that this does connect into it as well. I'm getting unstable connection to the internet. I apologize if anybody can't hear me. I'm just going to push right through. One more fact, which is critical: ineffective interventions. And we've done a lot of studying. And ineffective interventions, there are two big ones. I'm sorry, counselors, in some cases, isolated individual or small group counseling that is not built in to the wide and have school-based enforcement is not very effective. And then, of course, the discipline, laws on punishment, the zero tolerance concept, that does not work well either. And the research is very clear on this. So we have to move away from these things. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what we got. Use different colors for different tiers here today. And we're going to get ready to, let me give you an overview of what we're going to do with tier 1, 2, or 3, and then I'm going to jump into tier 1. We understand that at tier 1, we have to define a set of core features for school-wide bullying prevention. What are we going to do school-wide? We need to consider what we're doing with social emotional learning and character ed. You know, one of the things that drives me crazy, I love our guidance counselors and they have their word of the day. And so we practice our word of the day. If we're doing those kinds of things, they are excellent, but we have to connect them to our SEL and to our school-wide expectations to make sure that they are connected. We got to figure out how we're going to embed bully prevention into our existing school-wide expectations, whether it's PBS, whether it's whatever it might be. Restorative practices, whatever your school-wide is, and I'm a PBS person, but whatever it is, you're doing something school-wide, even if it's just the code of conduct, we have to define how to embed the bullying prevention into that. And we have to look at our data, because we have to find out, again, if we got bullying on the playground, the very first thing we should do before we even teach any more about bullying is to make sure we have supervision on the playground that can help prevent it. Okay. This tier 2 and tier 3 things we're going to be talking about. Secondary interventions. We're going to talk about the tier 2 intervention matrix. And this is a critical piece. We're going to look at what motivates the kids. And then some of the small groups, the check in, check out, the check and connect, and so forth. And then tier 3, the tertiary, we'll briefly discuss. This is not a tier 3 presentation, but I'm going to share them with you and talk briefly about them. Cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive therapy, family therapy, MST, those kinds of things, multi-systemic therapy. So we'll touch base on those as well. Okay, so here we go, tier 1. And I'm going to have to move quick because we're at 4:27. So please bear with me. I know we want to get this done by 5 o'clock, so I appreciate that. There are lots of school-wide approaches. And we have to buy into school-wide approaches and get everybody on board. Then there are a number of them: MTSS, PBIS, other school-wide approaches. Alveus is a school-wide anti-bullying approach that looks in some ways very much like PBIS. We know we have our SEL, our social emotional learning, other kinds of things we may be doing school-wide. The key is that there's an accepted and consistent set of school-wide behavioral and social expectations that are taught by all of the adults to all of the students. That's the key here. I don't care what you call it. Call it kick them in the pants, and we all teach them how to kick them in the pants. No, we don't. I'm teasing. We don't really do that. But whatever it is, we're all doing it. The adults are all teaching it, and we're teaching it to all students. Okay. All right. I did mention Alveus, and I want to just make a plug. This is maybe a presentation we do later on. Dr. Mark Mitchell, those of you that are familiar with Dr. Mitchell, who was up at Winthrop, he's now retired. And I spent a lot of time talking about how Alveus and PBIS can work together. If you spent the money on Alveus, how we can implement that along with other school-wide initiatives we may have. So I'm not going to go into that now. I just want you to know that is available. If you have a question, contact me, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. Alveus is the first and the best researched anti-bullying curriculum, but it's also quite costly. So if you spent money on it, I understand that districts are going to want to keep using it. So, I'm happy to talk to you about how we can make that work with other initiatives if you would like. The curriculum we're going to spend most of our time with today a lot of it comes from Alveus, but it's actually published by the PBIS Technical Assistance Center. It's free, and you can get it at this location. Not saying other curriculums aren't good. I'm just going to use it as the model that we talk about here. But everything I'm going to talk about, whatever school-wide system you're using, whatever bullying curriculum you're using, as long as it's evidence-based, use it, go with it. But we have to make them connect, and that's what we're going to talk about. And we have to have a tier 2 component to it, which we're going to talk about. Okay, these are the PBIS bullying prevention, the covers of those materials. They're available at the website, and they're free of charge. They're pretty good. They're very good, actually. Okay, tier 1, bullying behavior comes from victims, or typically becomes more likely because the victims or bystanders provide rewards or motivation. And I want us to think about that word motivation right now, and we're going to talk about that more when we get to tier 2. So keep that in the back of your mind. And we know that in bullying, kids, the rewards that they get are virtually all attention. In some cases, it may be they're getting money for stealing lunch money and things like that. But mostly, it's social attention, social recognition, social status. There could be a small amount that's for obtaining items, but it's mostly obtaining attention. Okay, and this goes back to what I've already said 2 or 3 times here. Many schools already are presenting some form of bully prevention. Most schools are already implementing some kind of tier 1 behavior system or school initiative. What we have to do, don't stop doing what's not working. Add the smallest addition that will have the biggest impact. That's what we talked about earlier, not overwhelming, and never add something new without identifying what you'll stop, or at least what existing process can be used to make it happen so we're not overwhelming people. And the big question is, have we connected 1 and 2? And that's the critical piece here. Okay, although common and frequent, most bullying and harassment, we've already mentioned this, is outside of adult supervision. So the first thing you need to do is look at your data and make sure that if we're getting bullying in places that are not appropriately supervised. I used to go and visit schools, and I would always drive by the playground, elementary and middle schools. And I had a data point, which I called the rusty folding chair. Now, playgrounds have changed a lot in recent years. We got very fancy ones, but years ago, you would go out there and I would invariably see the rusting folding chair that was placed in the shade. The teacher had pulled it out from under the stage or wherever they kept the folding chairs for the auditorium. And they were sitting outside, and this is where they would sit and wait. And I had the data point. The more rusty folding chairs I saw on the playground, the more I knew that there was going to be a bullying problem on that playground. And I say that just because you have to be out and engaged. And we all know that now. It's very common, but we can't say it enough. The bullying is going to occur where kids are not supervised. That's why that stairwell and the airlock, boy, the airlock between the two doors is a place that often sees bullying. So think about those kinds of places where there's not good supervision and what we can do about that. That's the simplest we can do to reduce bullying in our schools. And of course, electronic bullying is very difficult. I'm not specifically talking electronic here, but it is a component of what we're talking about. It's the same kind of thing. Okay, and we know they're gonna work. Anti-bullying is going to work better if you have your school-wide framework, whatever it might be. And we understand our triangle. And I bring this up here because we are going to talk about what we're talking so far about the universal things, but we are going to talk about the secondary and the tertiary. And so we want to make sure we all understand the triangle. You've been exposed to this lots of times, so I'm not going to go into detail, but it's MTSS continuum, PBIS, RTI, wraparound systems, interconnected systems. They all use the public health triangle. And that's what this is. This comes from public health, not out of education, believe it or not. The triangle comes out of public health from the 50s. Okay, creating effective learning environments when we're doing these things, it's got to be consistent. All of the adults, as we mentioned, got to be predictable, got to be positive. We can reduce a lot of our behavior if we are very predictable and we do the same things over and over and over again. I do a lot of work with classroom management, and predictability in the classroom is one of the keys to good classroom management. And, I'm not going to go into that detail now, but that's something we can talk about at another time. Okay, what doesn't work? We've mentioned some of these already. Identifying the bully and excluding him or her for school, pretending that bullying behavior is fault, blaming, the blame game here, giving them a talking to. You know, we said that giving them a talking to doesn't do a good thing, doesn't do anything at all. And then this last one is critical. Mediation between the bully and the victim is exactly the wrong thing to do. If you have two kids that are in a fight, and that's all it is a fight, yes, mediate between the two kids in a fight. If you have true bullying, it's repeated, there's power involved, you do not try to mediate between the bully and the victim. That is the worst thing you can do. One of the problems we have is exactly what I just said. Because we have bullying that gets a fight that gets identified as bullying and mediation seems to work, we try to use that in real bullying situations. Worst thing we can do. Okay, what does work, and we see that list here. Again, we have so much to cover. I'm going to go quickly through this. We all understand these things. What does work, and there's reference to it in the third bullet, the stop signal. We're going to spend some time talking about that in just a minute. What do you do if you experience problem behavior as a victim or recipient or as a bystander? Bystanders critical. The Alveus approach spends a lot of time talking about the bystanders as someone that can make a difference, and that's good research. And this approach needs to do that as well. We need to teach our bystanders. It isn't just the victim that can try to stop the bullying. It can also be the bystander. And the other piece of bystander is to not reinforce the bully, because as we said, the bullies do this for reinforcement. They do it because they're reinforced, and the bystander can do two things. They can stop the reinforcement. They can also help the victim. Okay, so what we want to do with our tier one, we want not talk about bullying. Don't focus on bullying, but what we want to do in tier one is focus on what the appropriate behavior is. What is responsible? How should we treat others? We need to be respectful. Is bullying being respectful? But the conversations around respect and responsibility and how we should behave, not about you're bad if you do this, okay? And teaching social responsibility, obviously respectful, responsible, safe. We need to focus, as we said before, on these non-structured settings. And we want to make sure that if someone directs behavior towards you, that we understand what we can do to stop. Or if you are exhibiting this behavior and someone tells you to stop, what you should do. So this is the broad teaching we're doing in our bullying correction. The three-step process, Alveus promotes it, PBIS promotes it, is the stop, walk, and talk approach. You need to, within your school, you know, when I do classroom management, I quite often talk about having an attention-getting signal in the school, that sometimes schools have an attention-getting school that's used school-wide. And attention getting signals should always have a verbal component and a visual component to it. Same thing is true with the stop signal. So decide on what the stop signal is. It's holding our hand up and saying in a loud, clear voice, stop. Whatever it is, we have to teach it. What will work best in your community, come up with it. Doesn't have to be that, it can be whatever works best for you. And we have to teach it. How do you deliver the stop signal if you're being intimidated, harassed? Okay, I'm going to use my acting skills now. You don't say, oh, please stop, because that's going to encourage the bully. We have to, when we get to our tier 2, we have to teach our victims that how to say stop in a way that doesn't encourage the bully to continue or act further. So how do we deliver it and then how do we deliver it if we see somebody else being teased or bullied? And then walking away. How do we teach the person to walk away? We stand up tall, we turn, we walk away. And how do we walk away so that the perpetrator gets the ideas? Don't cower and cringe away. So we have to teach these things. Remind students most socially initiated problem behavior is maintained by the peers. So they have to look at their peers in the eyes when they walk away. And we have to build a reward for walking away. And then finally, the process of getting help, the talk part, where reporting the problem to the adults. And we have to make sure that we don't get into this tattling kind of thing. And this is a difficult point right here. How do we tell the difference between tattling and telling the adult? And that's a hard one. It's a difficult one. We want these students to ask for help, but if they do it in a firm, direct way, where I've asked this person to stop and they won't do it, it can be done in a way that doesn't sound like, well, you better do something to Billy because he's been mean to me. That's not what we're looking for. We ask the question, did you request to stop? Did the person stop? Did you walk away the way you're supposed to? Okay, thank you so much for that information. I will follow up. But not this whiny, tattly kind of approach. And sooner or later at your school, everybody's going to get asked to stop. So what do we do if you get asked to stop? You stop, take a deep breath, go about your business. No big deal. Okay, these steps should be followed even when they don't agree, even if the student doesn't agree with the stop signal. If they say, I wasn't doing anything wrong, it doesn't matter. If you're told to stop, you stop, take a breath, and walk away. And that's an important point. There's a lot of other social situations in this day and age where the stop signal is a critical issue. So teaching this here in bullying, there's a bigger life lesson that I'm not going to allude to it now, but you all know what I'm talking about. That no means no and stop means stop. And so it's good to teach this lesson now in the bullying context. Okay, how adults respond is critical. And I'm going to run through these quickly as well. I'm glad you told me. How are you going to reinforce the students? Because we all know that we have adults in our building that when they get told about bullying, don't respond to it well and don't do a good job. So we have to give a script to our teachers. We have to give a script to our teachers on how to reply. Oh, they weren't really doing that, were they? No, I'm glad you told me. Thank you. And you did a good job by telling me. Give them that reinforcement for coming and telling you, as long as it's done in that appropriate way and is not this sort of tattling kind of approach. You ask who, what, where, and when. You make sure the student is safe and they're being bullied. And then you ask the victim, did you tell the student to stop? If yes, very good. Did the person do what did they do? Did they walk away? Well, if you said stop and they walked away, you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Good job. And I'm going to go find him and I'm going to tell him, thank you for walking away. And we're going to reinforce it there as well with the bully. These are the things, these are the scripts we have to give our teachers because they don't necessarily know how to do this and they often react in an inappropriate way. So did did Johnny tell you to stop? How did you respond? If you didn't respond appropriately, we're going to practice it. We're going to practice walking away. After he told you to stop, did Johnny walk away? Or did he stay right there and keep saying, stop, stop, stop? You got to find that piece of it too. And then you got to go back to the the student who is bullied. And we practice our responses. Okay. I got to finish up the tier 1 part to jump to tier 2. 5 student skills, we see them here. Don't forget the bystander stop. We can talk about that as well. I didn't spend much time on that here, but I need to move forward and come up with that school-wide stop routine. Faculty and staff, how do we do this? And remember, we have to understand and apply this, across the school day. How do we follow up? How do we make sure the same messages are sent during our school-wide expectation times? Okay, tier 2, yay, finally. We have our curriculum, our triangle that we have here. We all are familiar with it. What I want you to think about right now is this one. What are the primary prevention? What are the secondary prevention? And do you have any tertiary tier 3 interventions that you are familiar with in your schools or you are promoting at your schools? If you want to, if you have some ideas, if you type them in the chat box and put, and I'm particularly interested right now, quite frankly, in secondary. We're talking about secondary. We will mention tertiary in a minute, but secondary particularly. What secondary interventions do you have in your school? And just type some in the chat box if you would. And we'll get Taylor in a minute to read a number of them. See if we get some in there. Got a few. Taylor, do you got a couple that you can mention that everybody's mentioning?
Yeah, so we've got a contribution of see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that this might be an opportunity for us to share additional secondary prevention, actionable areas that folks might be able to engage in. Maybe this is a space for us to build on.
Okay, that's what we're going to do.
Feel free to continue adding as we move forward.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so your school may or may not have good built-out secondary interventions. A good bullying curriculum has to have a secondary intervention for the bullies and the victims, and that's what we're going to talk about. These are some classic interventions at all 3 levels. Not just for bullying, these can be used for other things, but bullying has to have a good secondary intervention. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And we're going to talk about secondary interventions in a way that can be useful in other formats as well, not just bullying. Okay, small group starting points. We know that secondary interventions are small group interventions. We know that these are not interventions where a student has had a full fib or BIP. That's tertiary, but or some kind of diagnostic work. So the secondary area, particularly in South Carolina, we don't do a good job at when we could solve a lot of our problems by doing a good job here. Small groups work if we have a universal school-wide behavioral initiative in place. Again, whatever it is, school-wide. We have to have that for our small groups to work because we have to relate the small group interventions back to the school-wide. They're evidence-based. We have to use some data, and we're going to talk about that specifically in just a minute. We use some data decision rules, and we have to remember that we have to give equal attention to practices and adults. You got to remember, any intervention that is evidence-based will only fail for 2 reasons. 2 reasons an evidence-based practice will fail. 1, you picked the wrong practice for the students. That's the student piece. Or 2, you didn't implement it well. It's not implemented with fidelity. That's the adult piece. So if you have an evidence-based practice, did you pick the right one? And if you did pick the right one, did you implement it properly? That's why they fail. So when people say, oh, I tried this program or I tried that program and it didn't work, it's one of those 2 things. It's not that the program is bad. It's either the wrong program or it wasn't implemented properly, if it's evidence-based. When do we use them? When universals are not sufficient to impact behavior, when a student displays chronic behavior. Chronic bullying victims, chronic bullies are exhibiting chronic behavior. And so bullying situations meet these requirements. What do we got to do? We got to match the intervention to the student need. The staff implementing the intervention have to have the skills and support to do it. All staff has to be aware of what's going on so they can connect it back to the universal. And we have to focus on the systems of support throughout. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I do a tremendous classroom management instruction. The single thing that we could do to help our teachers do a better job of their classroom management is the following. If we would teach our teachers not just to say, Johnny did it at 10 o'clock, he got in a fight in the classroom, who, what, where, when, but if we made our teachers, if our teachers could also think about and decide what the motivation for the child was. Kids do things for two reasons: to either to obtain something, Psych 101, to get something or to avoid something. Here's what we're wanting to do. What are they trying to do? Now, we know, we've already talked about it, in the case of bullying, our bullies are trying to obtain social status, attention, and they may be looking to get items as well, but mostly it's status, it's social status, get attention. Okay. I have created, with the help of Dr. Tim Lewis, this idea that there are 5 kinds of tier 2 interventions. And we're looking at them on this matrix. And one of the documents that Taylor will have available to you is a document that has more information on this. If we think about our tier 2 interventions in these 5 categories, the first is a social skills category. Those are the kinds of things our guidance counselors do. Social skills groups, that's one kind. Second kind of category going across the top here is self-management, things where we teach the kids to manage themselves. Good example of that is check-in, check-out, behavior education programs. Mentoring is a tier 2 intervention. Some mentoring programs are tier 2 interventions. Check and Connect is a tier 2 intervention program. Then we get into some that address more RTI issues. Academic peer tutoring can actually be both behavioral as well as academic, but as an academic, that's a difficult one to do. You really got to have good skills to do that. It's very effective, but I'm not encouraging at this point us to do that. And then academic support programs that we all are familiar with. What kinds of things can we do to help that? So I'm focusing on behavior now in these first 3: social skills training, self-management, mentors. I put down in the box, gentlemen's club. Many of you have that, a SIRS club. I had a school, we had a group for the girls. It was an inner city school, and they called it SWAG, Sisters with a Goal. Hugs, which is a check-in, check-out program. It's a little softer, that's used for elementary kids. Check-in, check-out, which we're going to spend most of our time talking about now. A coach's corner for mentors, check and connect, and so forth. So what you should be doing when I put that triangle up and you had tier 2, you should have things in each of these 3 categories. Now, here's the payoff on this. If you look in between, there's a behavior function. If we can get our teachers, when they send in their discipline referral, or they write up the kid in the classroom, even if it's not going to the office, not only to say, Johnny did this with Billy, and this is what he did, and he was throwing, pencils, and it was, at the end of reading, whatever it might be. If you can also say, I think he was doing it to for attention getting or to obtain items or whatever it might be, those 3 or 4 things, if we can do them, then we can match the child to the need. We know that bullying is obtaining attention, peer attention, and a check-in, check-out program is a very good program to use for this tier 2 bullying for victims as well as bullies. So in our tier 2 bullying, what we're going to do, once we've done this whole school-wide bully, BP stands for bullying prevention orientation, and taught them stop, walk, talk, and the whole school knows this, we are going to now focus in on the students with a higher likelihood of bullying or victimization behavior. Okay, and with them, we're going to do check-in, check-out, and do stop, talk, walk guidelines. And then as a team, you're going to make sure that these kids get a modified check-in, check-out for the times, because we have our data, that the bullying is occurring. So I'm going to use recess as an example. At the beginning of recess, the adult supervising recess should check in with the students that are traditionally victims and remind them how to respond to a problem behavior. If you are bullied on the playground, what you do is to stand up tall, put your shoulders back, use your stop signal, put your hand up, and in a loud voice say stop, or in a firm voice say stop. Then you walk, you turn, you turn with purpose, and you walk away from the person. And then you come and see me, you talk. Stop, walk, talk, and we go over that with them. At the same time, at the end of recess, they come back to you. Did anybody try to bully you? They did. Did you tell them stop? And did you walk away? What occurred when that happened? If they didn't come to you right then, maybe they felt like they took care of themselves. If they did, you absolutely reinforce that. You absolutely positively reinforce that. You're going to do the same thing with a perpetrator. Beginning of recess, this tier 2 intervention, check in, check out. Remember, Billy, if somebody gives you the stop signal, what are you going to do? And you make them verbalize that back to you. What are the three things that you do? It doesn't matter whether you think they shouldn't have said it or not. If somebody gives you the stop signal, you stop, you turn around, and you walk away. And you tell them specifically what you do. And at the end of recess, we check in again. Did anybody give you the stop signal today? That's really great. Nobody gave you the stop signal. Fantastic. I'm going to reinforce you because of that, and whatever the reinforcer is. Okay? Check in, check out. Tier 3 quickly, because we are just about at the end of our time. So I would spend more time on that, but I'm gonna jump forward to this just very quickly. We know we have our tertiary interventions here as well. And well, we see them there, function-based support, wraparound services. This is where we might get diagnostic, person-centered planning, a check and connect. This is a more individual one. I'm going to show you another name for it here in just a second. We'll talk about it. Check and connect can also be secondary, depending on how it's structured. Advanced support, school-wide initiatives. We have our tier 2 interventions, but aggressive and bullying behavior can sometimes occur for issues that we may not be able to solve just with school-wide and tier 2. Could be a mental health issue, could be family dynamic issues, could be other things going on there. So we have to use your data to identify the students who are in need of more intense support. Those people that are tier 2 intervention and are universal hasn't stopped that behavior. And we have our data. And so an example of tier 3 interventions, and we know by definition, tier 3 is one-on-one. The first thing that many schools go to, which doesn't call for a diagnostic work, is some kind of behavior contract. The individual check-in, check-out, that's the one, that's a tier 3 version of check-in, check-out, where it's really focused on them. The individual check and connect or shadowing ability, and that's, I got a typo there, but that's a form of mentoring. I left the M off on form of mentoring. Then we get into those things that obviously call for some additional diagnostic work, a medical referral, that there may be medical issues here going on. There could be other therapies, drug therapies, or other therapies that are needed. And then, of course, some things that perhaps an LPC, perhaps our school psych, some other, or a mental health counselor that's working in the schools might be doing some cognitive behavioral therapy. The family therapy is a form of MST, multi-systemic therapy, very effective. Rational emotive behavior therapy, RBT, some of these kinds of therapies. The ones in blue obviously call for some diagnostic work. The others do not. But these are examples of the tier 3 interventions. So, the end of this hour, what are we taking away? Here's what we need to do. We have to connect our bullying initiatives, social emotional learning, character ed, whatever our school-wide expectation is. Those things need to be connected in terms of language, in terms of when they're presented, how they're presented. Our SEL has to reinforce our bullying material. You don't just come in and have a SEL initiative over here. Oh, it's bullying month, and now we're going to throw this bullying poster on the wall, and we're not going to connect it to the other things. If we're doing that, we're not doing anything effective. Take the things down. If we're not connecting these initiatives take all the doggone posters off the wall. That doesn't do any good. Has to be connected. Number 2, implement the school-wide stop, walk, talk procedure. This is Olveus and PBIS recommended. And you don't have to use those materials, but use materials to do that. And remember the bystanders. Olveus tells us always to remember the bystanders. And then finally, use your tier 2 interventions for bullies and victims to directly address what they are doing. And of course, your tier 3 interventions if that becomes necessary. Whew. So that's where we go. We got a post-survey poll. And if anybody wants more information from me, I'll leave that up and I'm going to turn it back over. We're right on time, I think. Going to turn it back over to Taylor. And I apologize so quickly. It was so much information. And if you call me individually, I'm happy to go on a deep dive on any individual part of it. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, everybody who listened to me. I know I went fast. I apologize for talking so fast. And I look forward to seeing you all in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens. It was fabulous. And you know what? It just means that we have to connect more and pay closer attention. So as you shared with everyone, I did go ahead and launch our final post-survey poll. So if y'all could please populate that, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And do just want to circle back to Dr. Stevens sharing with everyone that the conference registration for the 2021 Southeastern School Behavioral Health Conference is open and you are welcome to go ahead and register. It is a hybrid format this year. So we will be having a live in-person option as well as a very dynamic virtual option. So within that, if y'all want to navigate to the website that I shared earlier, that again was www.schoolbehavioralhealth.org. And it's just simply that without BASC. The resources that were shared today around tier 2 interventions, as well as the bullying quiz, among others, will be available on the BASC website. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact Dr. Stevens. We are hoping that we are going to have Dr. Stevens back with us to provide a follow-up, either in the form of a webinar or in one of our other virtual enhancements through Working Through It Wednesday, where we could take a deeper dive into some of the, more some of the details that were discussed in our presentation today. So I see everyone saying great presentation and their thank yous, and we are so grateful for y'all joining us today. We hope that you join us for next month's webinar. They always occur on the final Thursday of every month. We look forward to your feedback. And of course, if y'all would ever like to participate in any of the BASC initiatives, whether it's nominating someone to bask in the spotlight, shine a light on a student or a community member or a staff or faculty member within your district, we would love to have you nominate them. That nomination form is available on our website as well. And if you would like to contribute your expertise, because we know we've got a lot of anecdotal experience on our webinar today to any of our content areas, you can do that through our Working Through It Wednesdays, which are our mini 30-minute webinars that we do multiple times a month and then post those to our Facebook. Please follow us on Facebook and check out our YouTube channel for the whole archive of all of our content. You can find us at BASC or at BBA of SC. So it looks like we've got some folks that are viewing the questions and contributing their responses, and I will give that a little bit more time here. And again, a giant thank you and appreciation for you, Dr. Stevens. I know this was a wealth of information to have to get through in an hour.
I'm noticing on the Q&A, there are a couple of people that said they weren't able to click the response. So some folks may be having some difficulty.
Technical difficulties are definitely the way of the world in our remote setting. So we'll make sure to update that for our next webinar. So gratitude to everyone. Thank you for your feedback, and we look forward to seeing you all next month. All right. So everyone have a fabulous evening. Do some self-care tonight. All right. Thank you again, Dr. Stevens. Bye.